Hey guys, I'm going to show you a quick way that I convert Midjourney images into 3D models. So in this case, I did a fairly simple prompt. So this is a depth map of a Mayan sculpture carved in stone, height map, trim sheet. Pretty straightforward, and as you can see here, I generate a bunch of these, and I use this method to kind of generate some 3D models from these. So I've gone ahead and downloaded this image, so I'm just going to go ahead and open it. Um, and so I'm going to kind of a warning for you. This is not going to be like, I'm not going to cover every single tool and everything. This is more of a workflow kind of run through. So I'm kind of grazing over this stuff and showing you exactly the steps I take. I will not be going into depth explaining anything. So for this, I just open up that image in Photoshop. And first thing I like to do is I like to use the neural filters to just upscale this. So in this case, I'm going to use super zoom. In this case, this is a 1K image. So I'm just gonna zoom it up 4 times. I'm gonna just apply the remove JPEG artifacts and click OK. So now I have a higher resolution image. I can do this in Midjourney, but why use credits when you don't have to? So I usually, first thing I do is I'll save this out. And then I move on to step number 2. So here, what I'll do is, again, use the neural filters. This time I'm going to use the depth blur. So I'm just going to activate that. And first thing I want to do is I want to uncheck focus object. And then I'm going to check on depth map only. And what that's going to do is give me something like this. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to apply that. Now I'm going to invert it, since in our 3D softwares, white is actually up, not black. So we just want to invert that map. And now we have our primary forms kind of isolated into a depth map. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to load up Substance Sampler. And now I want to isolate the secondary forms, right? So I'm just going to create new. By default, I've got it set to load just a plane here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to my my image that I saved. And in here, I'm going to just drag that in here. Should bring up this dialog box. I want to choose image to material and be at 4K. So here, I'm going to let that just run real quick while that, processes. I want to just change my tiling here to not tile. And I'm going to go to my image to material here, and I'm going to just change this. And I suggest you play around with different settings, but for the most part, I think this terracotta one does a pretty good job in isolating the secondary forms. So with that there, I'm just going to export this. So I suggest, doing an initial export, putting something together and running it through. I find, depending on the image, there is some back and forth. So I might just pop back into Substance Sampler and change my, for example, I might change some settings here to just get a different results, depending on the output I get in ZBrush. But in this case, I'm just going to run with this. I'm going to file, export. In this case, I want to choose EXR output. And in this case, I'm only going to do the base channels. So I'm going to go to general settings. I just want to name this. So just a temp name for the sake of this tutorial. And I'm going to go here and select this folder and export. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back into Photoshop and I am going to open up that export. So I want to pop in here and I want to grab the height channel. I'm going to pop that open and I'm just going to Control A to select all and Control C to copy. And I'm going to paste it into this document. And now I'm just going to set this to multiply. And then, so now we have our primary and secondary forms. One last step I like to take to get our tertiary forms is I duplicate my base layer, put it on top here. And I'll use filter, other, high pass. And I'll just do a fairly low radius high pass on this. And I will again set this to either overlay or multiply as well. This time I'll just run with overlay. And one thing you'll notice, this has a lot of kind of smaller detail in it. So I'm gonna do just a quick filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I'm gonna do about a 3 pixel blur just to blur some of that out. And then generally I do this at a rather low opacity, around 20%. So it's a subtle, but it does boost some of the details. So after all that's done, I'm going to just merge these and I'm going to File, Save As, and I'm going to save this out as a displacement map. I usually put a version number on this because, like I said, there is, depending on the image, there is back and forth, so I can try a few different variations of this, whether, you know, when I'm mixing these together at different intensities. The next step I do now is I'll pop into ZBrush. And first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna load up just this default cylinder here. I'm gonna append in a polygon plane 3D. I'm just gonna delete the original cylinder. And start from there. So here, first thing I want to do under geometry, I'm going to deactivate the smoothing of the divide. And I'm going to hit this with a few subdivisions until I'm around 1 to 4 million. I'm going to do this on around a 4 million polygon plane because my image is about 4K. So that's about, give or take, an pixel per polygon. So once I have that, I'm going to just import that texture that I generated. So I'm going to pull that in. And then under alpha, I'm going to import my displacement as an alpha. Okay, so now I'll pop down here, texture map. I'll activate my texture. One thing to note, ZBrush does do things upside down. So before I export this, I'm going to have to actually flip it 180. But that's fine. I'm just going to, for visibility's sake, switch to basic material. And here under displacement map, now I'm going to just activate that. The alpha I imported. I'm going to switch displacement map to mode. And here I'm going to start increasing my intensity. So let's start at around 0.5. And then we get something like this. So that's looking pretty good. Might be a little too intense. So let's try 0.3, give or take. There we go, that looks better. So now I apply that displacement map. If I go into transform now, just activate our quick edit. Now I have something like this. And you'll notice that's fairly decent. But I probably want to kind of just quickly modify this shape just a little bit. So I'm actually going to go into my move brush. I'm going to just start pulling this a little bit, at least the large forms. So it's a bit more, you know, pleasing to look at. And this, you know, the more time you spend on this, the better it's gonna look. But again, for the sake of demonstration, I'm gonna be rather quick about it. Maybe the nose itself looks like he kind of ran into a wall or something. Again, I'm doing this a lot faster than you probably should, and you know, again, the more time you spend on this, the better it's gonna look. But I'm gonna roll with that for now. Maybe I'll just pull some of this headdress up just to give it a bit more shape. But there we go. Now, one downside to this is that there is a bit of banding going on. So one thing I do is in Photoshop, I kind of lean heavy-handed a bit on the high pass, and that will kind of boost the tertiary forms a little too much. And the reason I do that is because I like to go into deformation here and use the smooth modifier, and I'll just smooth this out until a lot of that banding kind of goes away. And if you boost your tertiary forms quite a bit, that should now preserve a lot of that smaller detail. Now, just to take it, just to smooth out some of this stuff a little more, I use the flatten brush at a fairly low intensity, and I'll just go over my model and quickly just try to paint out some of this banding that I see. Again, the more time you spend on this little part, the better it's going to turn out, but I found I can be fairly quick about it because I do run this through Substance Painter after. And that will kind of help mask some of these issues. But again, it all depends on how long you want to spend making these. But ideally, you know, it's the least amount of time as possible. And in this case, I'm going to just do a broad strokes over this. And I'm using sub and add. You can't see it, but I'm actually tapping alt while I'm painting. So for the areas that I want to pull the grooves up to fill them in, I'm pushing alt. If I want to push the peaks or the high parts down, I'm just using the brush as is. So quick. Again, for the sake of this demonstration, I'm doing this much faster than I normally would, but you get the idea. One thing that is also good to do is at this point I'll do poly paint, make sure RGB is on, and I'll do poly paint from texture. And if you now activate the wireframe, it's a bit easier to see that. Just turn off RGB when you're done. Don't want to accidentally start painting on your model because we are going to kind of repurpose the color information later on. So I kind of tend to bounce back and forth between my wireframe and textured or colored version, just to see what the main thing is. I don't want to smooth out any details that are actually part of the model, I want to only kind of get rid of the banding, right? I don't want to accidentally start painting out individual, you know, little details. I want to try and preserve that as much as possible. Another thing is we probably want to kind of adjust the shape here. So a kind of side effect of this method is you do get some strange, you know, behavior in terms I would expect this to be somewhat smooth. So again, using the flatten brush just to get rid of some of these harder edges. I definitely want to get rid of all this banding on the face since this is going to be a focal point of this asset. Yeah. Again, some of these, like, you know, edges kind of get pushed up, so probably make my brush a little smaller and just push those edges back a bit. Again, you know, take a little bit of time at this stage just to refine your sculpt, refine the model. I'm doing this really quick for the sake of presentation. Cool. So another one thing I'm gonna do here is I'm going to just try to isolate my background here. I'm going to just unhide everything except that, and now I want to just clean this bottom part up. So to do that, and I'm going to go into my lasso here just to exclude these and these and these. There we go. Again, being fairly rough. You don't need to be too refined. Just cut some of this out. Cool. So what I'm going to do here under poly groups, I'm just going to group visible. So now I should have 2 poly groups. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to, whoops. Going to just mask that out. Invert my mask. I'm just going to push this back a bit. And I'm going to scale it flat. There we go. So once I have something like this, I am going to clear my mask. And I'm going to go into subtool and I'm going to duplicate this. And once I have that duplicated, I am actually going to just isolate this. I'm going to go into geometry. I'm going to go into delete lower here, and I'm going to go modify topology, delete hidden. So now I have this geometry isolated. And the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to do this Dynamesh. And I'm going to set the resolution at about 1000, give or take. And I'm just going to Dynamesh this. And what that should do is automatically fill in my back and give me a Dynamesh geometry here. So the next step I like to do is ZRemesher. Just check here. Okay. Never mind. All that looks good. So ZRemesher, polygon count about 15, and I'll ZRemesh this. Give it a second. Shouldn't take too terribly long. There we go. So it does a decent job. You know, this doesn't need to be perfect. It's not going to be animated or anything. So I think this is going to be just fine. So one thing I like to do just to make the UVing process a little easier, I like to just isolate the back faces here. I'll go into polygroups and I'll group visible again. So now I have a polygroup for the back. Under Z plugin, I'm going to use my UV master, turn off symmetry. I'm going to check on polygroups and I'm going to just unwrap this. If I flatten this out, you can see now I have a okay UV layout. Obviously, you know, if you can take the time to, you know, properly, you know, cut this and stuff, it's probably better. But again, I'm trying to do this as fast as possible. So, so now moving forward, I'm going to duplicate. Actually, I'm going to reactivate smooth. So under my divide, smooth, and I'm going to divide. And under subtool, project, I'm going to start projecting. So I want to do project all. I want to project the poly paint as well. And now I'm going to duplicate it or divide again and reproject. Duplicate again, reproject. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. One thing at this stage I like to do, again, the more time you spend on this, the better, but using my flatten brush again, and I just kind of smooth out these stretch marks and integrate these. But, you know, for the sake of speed and showing you, I'm going to, oh, shoot this. You know, I'm going to do this super quick and probably not do it at all because, yeah, this is kind of time consuming. And again, the more time you spend on this, the better. But for the most part, you know, you can be as loose or as tight with it as you like. So now I have a subdividable asset. And at this stage, what I'll usually do, I'll rename this something to like high res. I'll duplicate it. I'll use my decimation master. Just make sure you keep UVs pre-process current. Give it a second. I'll decimate. This will give me about, you know, a lower resolution mesh. Like I said, before we export, we should rotate this. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that and rotate this around 180, give or take. And now I'm going to export this and put it here. There we go. So now we have the model kind of made. So one thing I've done in Substance Painter is I've gone ahead and made this kind of smart material ahead of time. And this is just basically consists of just a, you know, you can break this down super quick. So this is just a base kind of rock material. doing some darkening on top with just some grunge. Again, more darkening. Then I'm doing a lightening of the edges. And then here what I'm doing is I'm actually bringing in the textures that I exported from ZBrush as well. And using that on top. And then I add things like moss, for example, if I want. And yeah, I'm going to do this procedurally later. But as you can see, you get a fairly decent result for something that's, you know, rather quick to do. And doesn't, you know, if you take a little bit of time, you can hammer a few of these out, you know, in a day. And it's okay results. I still need to refine this material a bit more, obviously, but you get the idea. And you know, that's not a lot of effort to get to this stage. So yeah, and if you set it up this way, the nice thing is I can create a bunch of these and then just drop my smart material onto all the different objects, right? So for example, I have, let's see, let's try this one. So in this case, I've done a similar, using this exact same method, except slightly different, but I've created these pillars, for example. And yeah, this is all very little manual work. The main manual work I do is just, you know, painting out some of the banding, and that kind of thing. So you get, you know, you get the ability to kind of rapid prototype a lot of these assets. Hope that helps, and I hope this this allows you to kind of do a lot of really cool stuff with your own personal projects or professional projects. Yeah, but just thought I'd pass that along. Hopefully it's useful to you. If not, it's hard. Okay, thanks. Bye.